I gotta be honest, I don't even know what a cell phone. I don't like this kind of stuff. All right, and then I've got my notes here. I feel comfortable when I'm down in Marine Scandia area, Hopeless and Vasa, and I can go on for an hour and a half without looking at a note. Or if it's Woodstees or Calvin Rutstrom is another collection that we have over the years. But it's fun to share. It's fun to see the mix of ages and young people here. So a little bit about me. I was Washington County Historical Society on their board back in the late 90s for 4 years, Restoration Society in Marine for a couple of years, on and off committees and projects. The log cabin down in Marine that got moved down in 1938 Centennial. Was involved with that, working with Minnesota State Historical Society, got that up and running. So currently on a board, the Women's Civic Club down in the Marine Scandia area, that all came to an end about 2 years back. So part of a group now, 501(c) and overseeing the Stonehouse Museum up on top, the Township Hall, and then the log cabin. So I do that a little bit of volunteer with that on the weekends. So it's fun to play hosts and tell stories and follow up with questions. So it's about logging tonight. Let's see. I grew up on, my folks had a cabin just north of William O'Brien State Park, right after the '65 flood. So they were there since '66, still have the cabin. My wife and I have our own cabin 3 miles north of there, just between Log House Landing and the Sioux Line Bridge. So, growing up on that river, it was my dad that got me into the logs and log ends, and there were a lot of deadheads back then floating by, and that gave me an excuse to jump on the boat and get the logs. You use them for landscaping between the logs and the rocks and what have you. Then we would go after the ends and the marks, and you know, he hung up a few of them in the porch there at the cabin and kind of led from there. But it was always fun to run up and grab that log and snag it, bring it back down, bring it up in the yard, make a bench out of it, or gardens and cribbing and what have you. I normally don't take the notes, but so I started about a week ago. I got a lot of the Dells visitors, and thanks to Bruce and the Taylor Falls, your quarterly magazine. So I read article after article after article. I told my wife Dawn this morning, I said, I'm so mixed up with these stories now and the dates and whatever, I don't even know how I can start. But I'll do my best. Right, okay. So a little time frame. 1805, Zebulon Pike, he comes up. He was a lieutenant colonel. He's looking for a site for Fort Snelling. He was also, that was the first treaty, 1805. He had no backup from President Jefferson at the time, so it was kind of a weak treaty, but it did start the ball rolling. What followed then after that was 1825, Prairie du Chien, and then the one that's why we're here tonight, 1838. And that's the V, I call it a V, that opened up the land for the first time. You go down to Prescott, you go up to St. Croix, and you go up the Mississippi, and then it's a straight line east-west right on the north end of Mille Lacs Lake. That's what brought the logging business, the guys from out east, rolling in with their camps. 1851, Travis de Sioux. 1854-55, that was to the northern Minnesota, Ojibwe. 1862, we have the Sioux Uprising, which didn't go over too well. 28 chiefs were hung there in Mankato. Treaties of 63, 4, and 7 pretty much got the rest of the land conceded there from Ojibwe to the north, Sioux to the south. Yeah, okay. just a little time frame. Marine on St. Croix, the census 1840 was 10 to 12 people. 1850, 114. 1860, 723. Marine, they like to, now I don't claim to be a historian in any way, shape, or form. I'm a collector. Let the historians do what they have to do. So Marine was not the first, we say Marine, first commercial sawmill. Well, that's because Fort Snelling across the river there, Mendota, was actually the first sawmill, but it was military. You come up here to Taylor Falls, and you had not Frank Steele. Steele was his last name. He was actually starting in 1837. Actually, in 36, you had Joseph R. Brown, who was actually here first with Indian trading posts, and some say he might have even been here a few years earlier. So sawmills, I'm just going to read off on what I've got here. Joseph R. Brown, okay, 36. Franklin Steel, that was 38. Marine Lumber Company was 38. When they plotted the land, came back up in the spring in 39. Arcola Mill, 46, 47. Mauer, Loomis, and Folsom were part of that Arcola Mill. So many of these partners would keep partnering with each other. They either had mills, or they were transporting these logs, they were buying up land, surveying the land, constantly estimating, scaling just what's out there. So three lumberjack titles I'm going to talk about is the timber cruiser. That was the guy that would go into the woods. So this is a log caliber. The guy would go in, he'd spend probably weeks, maybe even a couple months. He's working for the owner. He's trying to go in and see and maximize just how much lumber, how much board feet is going to come out of this section or many sections of land. So the timber cruiser would have this with him at all times. If you're familiar with marbles out of Gladstone, Michigan, William Marble started his company in 1880. In order to go into the woods, you needed four things. One is an axe, it's called a safety axe, marbles, Model 2, a knife, and many models of knives with marbles, waterproof match safe. That would come in, tighten down, rubber washer, seal it nice and tight, and a compass. The timber cruiser would go in. Sometimes he would have a scribe. They would go in and they would kind of square off a section. They'd get their bark, clean it up. This one here is unique because it's got the hash mark 20. That's on here. That's the log mark, the log stamp of the company. Here it is on a tool like this. Timber cruiser. Let's see where I'm leading off. This is my favorite tool of all. It's got an X, H, and double dart on there. Again, part of the logging company. I've got that on about 3-4 pieces. So that's always kind of special. So the timber cruiser, he's the one, and he's making the big money. He's working directly with Weyerhaeuser, with Walker, Taylor, Folsom. You know, those guys on top, they're working, they're hustling, but it's that timber cruiser that really is out there coming up with maps.
How long or just go out?
I'd say on average 1 to 2 months. And it's in the summertime. It's hot, the mosquitoes, it's swampland. They're going in and they're trying to find logging collections. Here's townships and ranges. They're trying to work it up. Here it is along the river. They're marking these camps. So when the logging first took off, these camps would be maybe just 2, 3, 6 guys. We're talking 1838, 940. It quickly went to a dozen. Within a couple, 3 years, you had anywhere from 70 to 100 per camp, 100 to 70 men per camp. Go ahead.
This was mostly white pine.
For the most part, white pine, yeah.
And so the caliper measures the diameter, but then they're also estimating the height of all those trees.
The height and what have you, yeah.
So they're
Look
getting...
close at it, Becky, there's all kinds of markings on it, so it's like a slide rule.
Got it.
So as you slide it up, you gotta really look close, but it's all marked with the board feet.
Okay.
So
There's a couple rule sticks on the other side. Those would have been in the mill. Okay. The caliber for the timber cruiser. I don't mind questions at all, but you gotta tell me where I left off.
Oh, sorry.
Mapping out.
Mapping out, yeah. That's kind of neat. We made copies. I've got it off the original book. So let's see, second person. The second person is the log marker, the sawyers or swampers, what they were called. So once the logs are cut, then they're dragged up to the roadway. The roadways would be all ice down, usually, hopefully to their advantage, get down to a river. Come spring, all the logs then go down into the river and float down. When they mark all the logs, it's at the time they're putting them on the wagons. That's when they mark them. Yeah? McGinley River?
No, it wasn't that coming south of there a little bit.
Okay.
And obviously it's on Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So to the rivers and the logs. Once the logs hit the log drive, so I'll jump into the second lumberjack, the log drive. So when I said 70 to 100 people, it was probably 100 over the winter time. 30 of them would head back and not be part of that river drive that was, I mean, cold. There were wet shoes, socks, every single day they're in the water moving these logs. And typically you think it's coming down the St. Croix, Mississippi, Namakagon, open water, but they're coming down creeks and creeks and small streams in order to get the logs through. On average, every 1 to 2 miles would have a dam. They would go up usually about 8 feet. So we think of Nevers Dam, 20-some feet up, I think, if I recall. So that was a big push of water 10 miles north of Taylor Falls to get it through the dells and the rocks. But all these streams, all these creeks, Clam River, somewhere I've got a sheet with all these river names. That's not there. John, do you see it?
Yeah.
Is it? I looked right at it. Here we go. Okay. So this is all the tributary of all the rivers coming down. It's Totogatic, the Yellow, the Clam, St. Croix, Sunrise, Snake, Grindstone. That's Schulenberg logging camp on the end there. His log and his log stamp. the Wisconsin side, Hay Creek, Gull Creek, Elm Creek, Frog Creek, Cedar Creek. So every mile or so, or they would have a splash dam, you know, maybe just up 2, 3, 4 feet, but typically 6 feet, and getting their logs just around a bend. It's no different than the 4 major log jams here in Taylor Falls. They had to get around Angle Rock. That's always where they started their plug up and then headed north. But to me, that's just fascinating what they had to go through, and pushing and cant hooks and peavy hooks, and they're rolling them logs, and then getting into bigger water and more water, and
Suppose
getting
they
them down.
dammed up those creeks too a little bit to get a little
Yeah.
water height?
Yeah. So,
Create a lot of swampland.
a lot of swampland. You know, sometimes farmers, there's a lot of legal and court cases in the lumbering logging business. And a lot of it had to do with, now we're probably talking 1860s, 80s, but the farms, and they would be backing up these, the water, and it's their grain and fields and oats, whatever. So, not a good sight there. So the lumber marks, that's, what's fun about the logging here is what you don't always see is these log stamps. And they're all different, they're all crude, a lot of them are shaped like hearts and clubs, symbols. Some are vented, you see the holes, not all of them are. In later years, they became a little bit heavier, nicer shapes. Every single one of these was registered with Surveyor General, Minnesota as well as Wisconsin. In 1861, there was four districts, St. Croix being one of them. Then you had Chippewa, you had the Black River, and Wisconsin River. So if you got north of Hayward and to the east, you could go as far up as Totogatic and Eau Claire River. You go east of there or north of there, now you're in a different strain. All them logs are coming down that Chippewa and they're bypassing Stillwater. So of all the logs here, everything here, the bark marks, and probably maybe about 50 plus, and I gotta say my father's collection. Because when I say it's my collection, then that means I might have done it last week, and that, you can't really do that. It's like taking firewood out of the park. But I had cut a deal with Tony Anderson, and he was National Park Service, a couple of superintendents back. So someday the collection with the stamps and the marks will end up somewhere locally, and maybe it's the National Park Service right here in St. Croix Falls. But, so anyways, these stamps, where was I going now?
Well, you're going to talk about the third person and then between the timber cruisers and then the lumberjacks and the sawyers and the, did you get all the people?
I don't think I did.
That's okay. Keep
Yeah.
going.
But I did have fun reading them Dell's articles. I mean, holy fuckers. I've read them all once before, but I read too many too quick. Timber cruisers, dry vans, trailers, let's see. So the booms. 1851 was the first boom. That's where they were sorting out all the logs, and that was at Cedar Bend, between Osceola and Cedar Bend, closer to Cedar Bend. 1857, it got reorganized, and that's when it went down to Stillwater. The Stillwater, the big boys there from the East Coast, they made a whole lot more money by sorting out down near their sawmills. Whereas up here, the only sawmills was Taylor Falls, Franconia, Marine, Arcola. So that all happened and took place. Let's see where. Thank you. Here's an interesting piece, and this is the real deal. This is 1857 HSLN. What makes this really neat. Will make regular trips during the season between Stillwater and Taylor Falls, stopping at all points on the river. So if you're heading north from Stillwater, your first stop would be Arcola, Minnesota side. Then comes Marine Mills, Minnesota side. And it would be Log House Landing, which was Vasa, and then turned into Otisville. That was a panic 1858. So that wiped out Vasa, Otisville got wiped out, and Copus came into play in 1905. Let's see, then as you keep heading up the river, the other stops then would be Osceola Mills, then Franconia, and then Taylor Falls. And that was daily, these boats back in the day. 13, many steamboats, but 10 of them were built in Osceola, that most people don't realize. 10 steamboats, 3 of them in Franconia, and 1 in Taylor Falls. And the one in Taylor Falls is Wyman X, son of Folsom. And I don't know which Folsom it was. There's a couple of them. I don't know if it was William, or I think William had a brother too. So, let's see. I don't think you can quite see it without the light, but that's a T with the curve. So it's actually a TJ diamond. Okay, that's James Taylor. That was his mark in the day.
When did they start using the stamps versus the bark marks?
Probably right off the bat, there were no marks. Michigan started stamps 1824. Wisconsin, it was all bark marks. When the registry came in 1856, they had to be marked, but it was bark marks. So as far as the stamps, 1867, 68 is when they came into play. $14 is what it costs to have a wooden cast to make the stamp. For every stamp, they were $2 a piece. So many times people would, the company in the logging camp would buy probably half a dozen or so because they break sometimes. So there's a few here that have broken. You got to look at it as if you stamp it and it's backwards. So that's a L diamond O. Okay. Trying to figure out where I want to go here next. So with the bark marks, every log was 16 foot. They would make them. So, you know, there'd be different measurements, but 16 is what they were shooting for. The bark mark would be made within the first 2-3 feet. X, Y, Z, all done by an axe. It would be an axe like that, or something like this, to make your X, Y, or the TJ, curving it with, you know, not big and wide like a broad axe is.
Did everybody have that skill?
What's that?
Did everybody have that skill?
No, it would take the right guy with the right steady hand. Mm-hmm. I would imagine it was more of an older gentleman. Mm-hmm. He's done sawing or swinging the axe. So it was the broad axe that took them trees down initially, probably for the first decade or two, and then the two-man saw came into play and things got a whole lot better. Logging mills, the Mully saw going up and down, very primitive, they would swap that to the circular saw very quickly, upgrading their machinery by the 1840s, 50s. Marine, they had a fire in 63, upgrading again. So talking to old timers in the past, the trees, they're this big around. And a lot of waste of the potential of that board footage out of that log. Then you get down to the end of logging, let's say 1900, 2000. The logs are small. They're going through all that work for a log this big. You can see a couple of the S's there. I think it's actually VS. This is a unique piece. It's a board that got cut out at a mill. There's the stamp that was on the tree, on the end. Questions? Perfect.
Go ahead.
Mix me up a little bit.
So you're saying the big giant ones that they're cutting out, they pretty much cleaned that out and then they're down to...
They're down to this big, yeah.
No kidding.
And then every log got stamped 3 to 4 times on the outer part of the ring of the tree. And that is so that when they were sorting logs, when they got down to what was initially Cedar Bend and then Stillwater, that way they could see the logs, they could see the mark, because it would be above the water line.
One thing,
18 feet long.
16, you said.
Well, they would go 16, they could go 18 and 20, depending on the camp or whatever, but I've been told 16 for the most part. But you could be right. And I always think it's not 16. I think it ought to be a rod. It's 16 and a half. But everything is by inch and foot with these scales. The 2 scales here, there's a Minnesota scale and there's a Wisconsin scale. And everyone's different. I can't read them. I don't know how to measure that stuff out.
When they stamp the log with the metal stamps, I always envisioned they slammed the end of it, but they were putting it around the outside of the log?
Yeah.
On the end.
So the early ones were a little bit smaller, the cylinder shape. They had 3 different foundries, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that right now. One was Duluth, one is Eau Claire, one is St. Anthony, and then possibly Stillwater. That's where they made the bulk of the stamps coming down that St. Croix district. To answer your question, this is not a good mark right now. This is worn down. It's like a T or a tree within the circle. Not all stamps are two-sided. So in the early days, they would put this up and then swing with another hammer. Okay? As these hammers got bigger and a little bit thinner with their design, they were swinging. You know, there'd be a much heavier hammer. And double-sided, so if you ended up chipping one side or whatever, you could go to the other side. But I mean, that's heavy. It's all steel. So. Let's see, bark mark and end marks. Any other questions? Go ahead.
What did they do with the tree stumps after they got the logs out of the tree?
Well, once they got done with everything, then the logging camp would turn around and make more money and sell it to a farmer with the stump. So
let me get this straight now. If Folsom had a mill in Franconia there, did he cut his own timber for his mill, or did he buy timber from whoever was floating it downstream?
they were doing a lot of that. Somebody like Folsom might have had 3 different camps going on. Or you take somebody like a Weyerhaeuser with many, many camps. Some were just, they never had a mill, but they were buying the logs and sending them down. Most of the logs, yes, Stillwater, down to Rock Island. Most of them went to Rock Island because that was the first mill that Weyerhaeuser owned. The bulk of the logs up here ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. Walker, Judd, and Vesey, one of the Judd brothers, he lived in St. Louis, and that's but working for Walker, Judd, and Vesey up here in Marine. But they're coordinating what have you, and they're buying logs over and beyond what they've actually cut. down to St. Louis, and all that headed west to
So
California.
say they're buying logs, and it didn't really matter whose stamp was on that log. They may take it into their mill, and they're gonna pay the logging company for it.
Based on the stamp.
Yeah, but they didn't necessarily sort everything coming through Taylor's Falls, you know, to get, you know, say if Folsom had logs for his mill, did he just take the logs that he wanted with his stamp?
With his stamp, and then he would trim them out and wrap them in small groups.
Yeah,
And then
sort
hopefully
every
got
log.
them here. You know, got them here or down to Franconia or down to Marine. But if it wasn't stopped then, they would still get credit, but then they would lose money. 50 cents, 65 cents per so many feet.
If it went downstream.
If they went down, and then the boom site would have to be doing more sorting and figuring that out.
So I assume they had a boom up here to catch logs around Franconia,
Yeah.
and then they had one in Marine, and then one down in Stillwater.
Yeah. And you'll see it on pictures here, I mean, the chain and the booms ahead of the sawmill. So they're sorting, or they get them on the shoreline opposite the sawmill, and be sorting there and working their way.
You might talk about the river navigation with the wind dams and
A lot of navigation on that river. You had the steamboats coming up, and they were hot and heavy, up and down, up until about 1890. Railroad came through in 1886. Navigating that river, you had a lot of wing dams, so they'd be 100 feet of rock, and by channeling that, the current then would create a deeper and a faster channel. Or there might have been a good center island just at the train bridge, Sioux Line Bridge. Just south of that bridge is a wing dam. And McLeod's Slough, McLeod's Island, just north of Log House Landing there in Cobus. That island's 1 mile long. The state line is on the Wisconsin side. The deeper and stronger river current is the Minnesota side. It was a slough. But the wing dam created a deeper channel on that side. Steamboats could work the other side. They also did rock piles to help break up that ice quick in the spring. In the wintertime, they would crib them 16 feet by 16 feet, chain, tying up the corners, what have you. In the wintertime, fill it up with rock, and then come spring, that whole crib full of rock would be there, and then they would add to that if needed. Just north of O'Brien State Park, there's a series of three rock piles, and then a wing dam, so it doesn't go into William O'Brien State Park at the boat landing. It channels them off to the Wisconsin side, and then that's where they did their sorting there ahead of time before the marine mill. So as kids, I mean, we'd go out on those rock piles and get a bucket of propellers, and props and what have you all the time. And I can remember one time with my dad and I and an uncle, it was about 4 feet down, but it was the old logging chain. Dad wanted to get a hold of some of that chain. So we spent 2-3 hours just taking turns, catching a breath, down there with a hacksaw under the water. We got the 12 feet or chain that he wanted.
How big were the links?
On the rock piles,
On the chain, yeah.
maybe this big.
This big?
But I've got, in my collection, probably 6-7 boom chain.
Okay.
They're 20 feet long, and the chain is this big.
they're huge.
And they're cribbing and sorting their logs prior to getting down to that boom site. They raft them ahead of time. They can avoid the boom site to get it down to another sawmill. Not everything stopped at Stillwater. Okay, more questions? Yeah.
It's more of a logging operation question, you know. My dad was in the CCs in the 36 years, 36, 37, and he was part of a crew that cleaned out the trees for highway number 1, I'm not sure. do that, a lot of times when the tree would fall, you would split or remove the wood, really.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, did they do that back in the 30s, 1830s and 40s when you started?
I don't think they had the equipment right off the bat to be climbing up and,
Yeah, because there was nothing more, he said.
but what you're saying makes sense,
Yeah,
and especially if you go up to Hayward, they're always climbing them poles. And
right, yeah. So, but that's why I was curious whether they did that back in the 1830s and that, or maybe like you said, you didn't have the.
I would say not. They had younger kids, younger boys, 10, 12, 14, doing jobs like that, and they were the ones probably with a handsaw cleaning up the tops of the tree.
The other question I had was about, do you know much about the horses? I understand they use a lot of horses to, logging.
Yeah, I've got pictures. There's lots of teams of horses. It wasn't all ox.
I was looking at.
Or mules,
Isn't the oxen though, up that big part too though? My ancestors were the ones that owned oxen, they had two ancestors, and their sons, and they only went up there with their oxen. Never all lived there, before it went in the river.
with ox.
There was oxen,
I just- I didn't-
a team of two of them.
2 ox, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it.
Yeah,
When,
yeah.
don't have your shoes, somebody got your oxen shoes.
This would be the ox shoes, and in many cases, they would only have it on one half, depending on the road. The roads weren't always flat in the woods. They'd be at an angle. So it's like skiing, you put your edge into the hill. Same thing with ox shoes, or same thing with horseshoes. So you see that kind of stuff. This is what they call a snow knocker. This would be on the horse on the side, and then you're constantly chipping the ice off the shoe for a better grip.
I think there's a spec to quote Swami.
There is this, and I forgot to grab it here, the swamp shoes. So it's kind of a wooden pad, and then you fit it in almost like a snowshoe, and that would keep the ox and horses through the swamp without going down all the time.
They used to use those when they harvested wiregrass
Yeah.
in Carlos Avery too.
Yeah.
I found a horseshoe up in a gravel pit in sandstone. And so, and the thing is about that big. And I assume it was used for logging, but it had cleats on the bottom.
Yeah.
And they look like it's all rusted, now, so I just keep it up on the brush. But it looks like they must have screwed them cleats into it, or maybe.
Yeah, and that was no doubt blacksmith made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
it's a huge shoe.
whereas the logger had something like this, on the logs.
But yeah,
That'd be your river.
kind of like the studs we used to have in cars,
Yeah, on the terrace.
tire tires.
Yeah. Well, more questions? Keep asking.
When they sent these logs through to the mills, I was looking at inventory or receipts for logs. Did they measure each log for its board foot volume, or was it just kind of, you bought 10 logs, 16 feet long? I mean, did they scale every one of them individually for the board feet?
The timber cruiser, he's going in, he's estimating. That's the number.
Well, once it's cut and it's taken out of the
I would think it's fairly accurate. And then, let's say logs that end up down at the boom, some don't have marks, or in some cases, nobody's claiming them. They'll have auctions. 1862, there was about 500 logs, and Stillwater paper, in fact, I think Taylor Falls paper as well, auctioned off those 500 logs because nobody was claiming the marks. What I hear more of is on a day if there's no marks or they can't read the marks, they've been worn down or what have you, they will blend it in percentage-wise for the day. So let's say there's 10 different brands, marks coming in, 10 different companies, and then you got 30-some logs. Those 30-some logs will benefit the other marks for that day. So you're constantly estimating, and they were watching everything close. Every district had a supervisor. They would rotate them every 2 years, so nobody got too comfortable. You know, the Chippewa district versus the St. Croix district. So there's.
Would he check the books for these mills then? What was
Well, I
his
think
job?
so, clerks, I've got ledgers at home with, it's unbelievable the detail with these ledgers. Folsom House has a lot of nice ledgers with a lot of great detail. Bob Walquist, his ledgers, I have all them now in my possession. 3 feet worth of ledgers, but it's all the lumber company ledgers, so it's the lath saw, the general dimension shakes and what have you, shingles, as well as the store and the company store and all the, I mean, these clerks were beautiful handwriting and all the detail, and I think we were checking that. Not that, as far as dishonesty goes, one thing that would happen too is the logs sometimes would get cut. You'd take a couple inches off and there goes the mark. And then they would remark them. But you didn't want to get caught. It's the same thing if you're branding cattle out west. You never want to be caught with a straight bar, a branding iron. First tree you see, that's where they'll get hung. So, so you put a stop to it right off the bat. Yeah.
With that caliper, I know they use it a lot, just kind of measuring out their board feet and stuff like that, and I know you can cut rings, but unlike existing big white pines that you see that probably were passed over at the time, and, you know, like one I just, on a trailer or whatever, but it was 91 inches around. Using that caliper, could you judge the age by it at all, like how old a tree might be, or?
Well, they're estimating at that point. They're trying to figure out a section or two.
Yeah.
You know, and is there enough there for one camp, or is there enough for 2 camps? And right off the bat, you're near the rivers, so it was easier. But a decade later, 2 decades later, you're more into the woods, and that's more roads, more time, and it takes time to.
Some of those trees are still living, believe it or not, like in Lost 40 up there.
Yeah.
And Lost 40 is a good example of it. That was because the surveyor moved up and didn't.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
It's been there. It's
Oh, yeah.
amazing, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
They're the original trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lost 40.
The last 40.
And the trees that were seedling when the lumberjacks came through are now 100 years old today.
I don't know how they walk, because they're way, that's way up there, they had a log down Mississippi now.
Yeah, it's 40 acres that never got.
Right.
Yeah.
And where is it?
But they would go miles. I mean, these trails would be, there's roads up there. You go up near Spooner and Hinckley. In fact, I think I wrote down a few of the names.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's some road names. Vesey Road, Tozier Road, Nelson Road, Mackey, O'Brien, Anderson, Stillwater. Now John O'Brien he was Taylor Falls. He had a house here. I don't know if his original house is still here. William O'Brien was his son. And that was lumber land. That started out 80 acres. 1948, 1952, somewhere there was the state park. The old military road that came through Marine was Judd Street, which is where the general store is and what have you. But on the south end is William O'Brien, the home. And they did not want that to be paved when Highway 95 came through. They fought that from 1920s to the 40s. Eventually, Alice O'Brien, the daughter, cut a deal then with the highway department and said, if you stay off Judge Street and you build 95, which was all swamp, that's when they donated the 80 acres and called it a swamp, or a switch there for the park. So, in fact, we got 2 marks here about a year ago. And this actually came in on eBay. Yeah. So 2 stamps, and I wasn't looking up William O'Brien as far as logging goes, but I like William O'Brien State Park souvenirs. I go after some of that stuff when they pop up. So under the William O'Brien State Park, 2 log stamps. This one here happens to be a HK, and the other one something diamond. I don't recall, but I've never gotten marks on a plaque. William O'Brien Lumber Company, issued July 5th, 1901 on this one. And because it wasn't with log stamps, and I caught it right away, it was just a very reasonable price to buy them both right off the bat, so that's kind of neat. And I was able to call the person that sold them through eBay, and it was an elderly woman and had a neighbor sell them for her. But it was her great-grandfather that worked for John O'Brien's camp, William O'Brien, and had the mark, and there must have been some money in the family out of Pella, Iowa. 2 nice marks to have. So.
Was the mill down in Marine, was that water powered or steam powered?
That was steam, yeah. Started out water,
No.
yeah. But then that water, then they had a cat track. Am I saying that right?
Sluice.
Yeah, that'd be another name for it, yeah. So all that water ran the flour mill, and then it would come down underneath Judge Street, the main street there in Marine, and then you got 2-3 saws going in various buildings, and then everything to the river. Oh, they started in the east, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. After Minnesota, in fact, Vesey, he took a crew of 17. After the Marine Lumber Company, 1884 was tornado, and that wiped them out. But Vesey with 17 guys went out to the state of Washington, Tacoma, and had about a 20 more year run of logging and did very well out there.
I was thinking about what you said with conservationists and nobody trying to preserve something, but one person that comes to mind is Mary Gibbs with Itasca State Park, and she really, I believe she fended off people with a shotgun. She was sitting there guarding the land and the trees, saying, "You're not going to take these." So Itasca State Park has old growth forests because of one great woman.
Yeah.
It might be more complicated than that.
Well, we have a cabin out in Montana, and so I've been able to watch over the last 40 years modern logging happen, because plots of land get traded between the U.S. Forest Service and logging companies. And so there will be squares of land up in the mountains that just get clear cut. And like back in the 80s and 90s, when I say clear cut, I'm talking, it looked like Armageddon. You know, they just came through with bulldozers and left piles of just crap. You know, it's like they bulldozed everything after they'd cut the trees. Well, now they're a little more conscious of leaving undergrowth, because the soils out there are really delicate and you know, not very stable. And on the mountainside, you have to have vegetation to keep unstable soils in place.
Yeah.
And so they've become smarter about you know, they'll come in and take the valuable trees that they need, but they don't destroy everything. And so things grow back much more quickly, you know, from looking at a mountainside, that square will green up, you know, maybe in 2 years instead of 10 years, you know, because the soil it's mountainous and it's Montana, and so there's not great rainfall like we have here in Minnesota. And so it does take a while for the land to recover. And if you dig into it, it takes 50 years for it to recover. So, I mean, here in Minnesota, I think our forests have recovered, but we don't have boreal forest like it was. You know, this was all with the white pine boreal forest. We had herds of elk. I mean, they were native here, and they kept the white-tailed deer population in check. Now we have to do that ourselves.
And pay for it.
What?
And pay for it.
And pay for it, that's right.
One last thing, so the immigrants that came over, they're mostly Swedes. Of course, there were Norwegian and Irish and German and what have you. But so when I'm hosting the log cabin there down in Marine, I always like to remind these loggers, the lumberjacks, what have you, yes, they were working their tail off 6 days a week. Saturday night, maybe a little fiddle playing and some cards, and Sunday they rested. But it was the mom back in the log cabin, dirt floors, 5, 6 kids, one on the way, and she's maintaining that cabin, keeping it heated, warm, firewood. Hopefully Dad had enough firewood pre-cut. Entertaining those kids, mending socks, maybe a couple animals there at that cabin, goat, or cow, something for milk. But what a sacrifice, that generation, Mom and Dad sacrificing together for their next generation. And especially around here, I mean, lots of farmers. I can only guess half of you went to Gustavus. I know Don did. So. Anyway, that's what's fun when I bounce around between the Township Museum and the log cabin, you know, from one Sunday to another or whatever. 2 different stories. So, and Folsom Halls. We come up here every year for the Christmas lighting. And then probably the only thing historical connection is the farmhouse we have, 1854, in Moraine. We're 1 mile west of the village of town there. So the family that was there in the 1880s, last name was Falk, school teacher, Vasa School, Bone Lake, and Hay Lake. Then he moved up to Taylor Falls and became postmaster. So, Andrew Falk. So we take a lot of pride too in our older house. That's how we got into a lot of this collecting too. We were ready to tear that house down when we bought it. It's a 97-acre farm. We started hitting the auction, started hitting the estate sales. We needed to find old posts to create a porch, and we've added on a couple of times and actually restored it. We didn't tear it down. It's been featured on house tours and Home Garden TV with Bob Vila. And it's kind of fun. It's all antiques, that country living type atmosphere. And you run into Jim all the time. He's out there.
Where do you store all your artifacts? Do you have a museum at home? Or?
Well, we've moved 4 buildings onto the property. So, a chicken coop, a 2-seater outhouse, a little red barn, and we have an 1850 log cabin that we knocked down. Gamble Garden turned that cabin down because it was a combination of dovetail Swede and square notch German. One neighbor helping another. But Gamble Garden, there's a great museum, but it's 1850, the mission statement, 1850 to 1900 and Swede only. So,
German farmer.
yeah. So it's fun. We collect and enjoy it, and, from pottery to whatever. Wood skis, You put the spark in me there a few years back. I had a lot of wood skis, but
You need any more?
we've done a couple of the displays, so, and that's fun. And same with, we tied the displays in with snowshoers and cross-country skiing, ice skates, vintage ice skates, and the ski resorts. I mean, you got Croix, you got Hoggins, Snowcrest, Birch Park, so it's kind of fun to, Englewood, right across the river from William O'Brien State Park, that was only about 6 years. So it's fun to tackle and jump into certain things.
It'd be fun if they brought it back again, but do you remember about 20, maybe 25 years ago, they had a log home tour in the area here, and people opened up their homes, because just like you say, myself included, we live in these old farmhouses and everything else where all the trusses and stuff, it's still got rod, it's still got bark on the trees, you know, and that type of stuff, but the log homes that the Swedes built and that type of stuff, there's still a lot of them around, and they restored them on the inside, kind of like what you're talking about you did with your place. And they had a log home tour, I think it was part of the Taylor's Falls Historical Society or whatever, you know, but it was really neat, going to some of these homes and.
It was Chisago County.
Was it, huh?
Chisago.
Was it Chisago County that had that log home tour and, yeah, they
I
had.
remember reading that.
Yeah, they had a map and, it was really interesting.
We need to finish ours on the inside. The exterior, it's all done. but,
Yeah.
We got the Swedish newspaper, and then it's all birch twig, and they use that for the plastering.
Oh.
So we peeled that off. We did save some of that twig look on the one wall.
You know, I got a house that I started tearing the wall down, and it was that plaster, and it started out with plaster, it was a quarter-inch thick, and it got like almost an inch thick, you know?
Yeah.
So I never got that far, so I never got to the Swedish newspapers. I gave up, I just went over it.
Well, that was their
Too much
installation,
work.
yeah.
But,
Any other questions? Last
I
one?
had one, have you ever been to the White Pine crashing show? There's a fella there, he's got it's a building about from here to the wall, just full of logging things that he's collecting. All those logging cabins up by McGrath and around there.
Okay, and there it is.
Scour around them.
No, I haven't been there.
Oh, just, he's got axe heads, you know, just lined up on the table. Oh, man.
Well, that's another collection I have. Axes. And I like them all. The goose wing axe is my favorite. Yeah.
I've got a keen cutter axe set if you're interested.
I think I've got some of them already. Yeah. No, I like them. I can't think of the broad axe. Well, the one here is unique too. It's Kent axe. This is your typical logger's axe. Is here, and there's another one down the way. But I mean, they're heavy. They're all curved. You know, some are right hand, some are left hand. So the goose wing axes, they pretty much come out of Germany, and then Pennsylvania. This is a Kent axe, so that's on both sides, and that's English.
So that was a felling axe then?
Yeah. So,
you think after every day they would have to take it to like a round grinding stone or something like that?
well, your loggers, that's what they did on Sunday. They sharpened up the powder, axes, and saws, and be ready there first thing Monday morning.
Sodas for construction.
Well, take the time. I know that you have beverages here or something going on. Go ahead, we'll have this set up here for a bit. Any questions? Or?
Thank you. All
Thank you
right.
for